Kane didn't speak again. He walked. The gravel cracked under his boots, slow, steady, deliberate. Not a single look back. Not a single glance spared for the two men still standing there, unsure if they should speak or act or just disappear. He didn't care. That moment had passed. So had their power. The younger officer reached for his belt, not out of duty, but habit, something to anchor his hands. His partner just stared at the ground where the badge had landed. The imprint was still there in the dust. So was the silence. Kane reached the door of his vehicle. He paused, not for effect, but because legacy sometimes has weight. Not everyone could carry it. Not everyone had to. He opened the door and climbed in without a sound. Inside the patrol car, the radio crackled again. This time, a supervisor's voice. "Confirm you have visual on Field Marshal Luther Kane. Repeat, Field Marshal Kane." The name hit like a slap. Not loud, but absolute. They didn't answer. Couldn't. In the background, a voice from a nearby sidewalk called out, "Yo, was that him?" Another voice followed. "Check your feed, man. It's already up." The bystander's video had reached the internet before the officers even reached for the radio. Kane pulled the door closed. The engine started. Soft, clean. As the vehicle turned and rolled away, the sunlight caught the metal on his uniform one last time. It shimmered, not with pride, not with defiance, but with the quiet burn of being seen too late. Behind him, neither officer moved. They just stood there, frozen. Not from fear, from recognition. From the knowledge that they'd just become a footnote in someone else's legacy, and not the kind history forgets. "You served?" The question came fast, without tone, from a TSA agent who barely looked up. Kane nodded. "Yes." The man scanned the ID again. "What branch?" "Army," Kane replied softly. The agent's fingers paused over the keyboard. Kane didn't add anything. He never did. Explaining medals to a man who couldn't see beyond melanin had lost meaning long ago. But his silence made the man glance up. "That your real rank?" Kane looked at him, not harshly, not accusingly, just long enough to make him feel it. "Yes." The agent squinted, then buzzed him through without a thank you. Kane kept walking. In the war zone, rank saved lives. At home, it earned suspicion. A general once hugged him in Kabul, and a year later crossed the street when they met again in D.C. At the gala, Kane showed up in full-dress uniform. Not to impress, but because the invitation said formal military attire encouraged. The valet had blinked, hesitated. "Are you expected, sir?" Kane had smiled. "Apparently not." Inside, a colonel he'd trained 2 decades ago chuckled loudly to someone beside him. "Guess they're letting everyone in these days, even the display models." Kane ignored it. He stood near the corner, nodded when greeted, said little. A server passed by. The tray wobbled. Red wine spilled across Kane's chest. "Oh, I didn't see you there," the server said, eyes avoiding his. Kane dabbed the stain with a napkin. He didn't get angry. Just stepped away. The linen turned pink. It looked like it had seen that color before. The Summit suite smelled of bleach. His briefcase had been overturned. His family picture torn. Nothing stolen, just touched. Just violated. On the mirror, 4 letters. Carved roughly, intentionally. Still wet. Kane reported it, of course. 48 hours later, an email. Inconclusive. Case closed. No further escalation recommended. No fingerprints. No camera angle. No follow-up. "We can't prove it was targeted," someone had said, then added, "Pushing this might complicate your security clearance." He didn't push. Not on record. But later that night he stood in front of the mirror with a cloth, wiping away what they left. knowing they meant him to see it, not others. Kane sat alone in the officers' lounge. Behind the wall, two young lieutenants laughed. Poster boys here again. He only made it because they needed someone in the brochure. You know the drill. Kane stood quietly, didn't say a word, walked out without meeting their eyes. 2 days later, one of those lieutenants found a note folded into his locker. It said, "Earn it or leave it." That one did better. The other didn't last. Every step up came slower. Not because he wasn't qualified, but because the handshakes grew colder, the applause shorter. Commanders introduced others with decorated, fearless, future of this force. Kane, respected in his lane. He noticed when they moved him out of group photos, when they skipped his citations in newsletters, when the checkpoint video surfaced. Many recognized his face, but few forwarded it with pride. Most just forwarded it with silence. Kane stood before the case on his wall, a shadow box lined with green velvet, his grandfather's batch inside, from 1942. He'd never worn it, said it was given, not earned. They didn't respect me, just the idea of what I wore, the old man had said once. Kane finally understood. The slap wasn't new, but it was different, because it didn't just land on a piece of plastic. It landed on history. The department called it unclear. Non-compliance was mentioned. So was routine check. Footage told a different story. Some networks blurred the sound of the slap. Some cropped Kane's uniform. The department declined to comment, but hashtags didn't. He earned. It trended for 72 hours. Veterans posted their own stories, photos, salutes. He outranked every man in that precinct, one wrote, and they slapped him like he hadn't given them freedom to do it. Kane didn't retweet, didn't need to. She showed up quietly, notepad tucked under her arm, press badge flipped backward. "I'm not recording," she said. "I'm just here." Kane looked at her, then said nothing. She slid a folder forward. "These are past complaints, buried, all similar." Kane opened it. 13 faces, different names, same outcome. Closed. Inconclusive dropped. He didn't speak. He flipped through them slowly, one by one. One had a scar across his lip. Another had written, "No one believed me." Still doesn't. Kane stopped at that one, stared for a long time. In offices across the city, men clicked delete. Old tweets, group photos, celebration posts with Kane cropped out. A captain archived his retirement post, the one that once called Kane a dear colleague. A retired general issued a statement. "We must do better." No names, no accountability. But it was too late, because other people started speaking. A former cadet posted, "I nearly failed out. He vouched for me. He didn't even know me. They spit on that." It wasn't rage. It was reflection. And it was louder. Kane walked into the academy without a word. Cadets shifted in their chairs. Instructors lowered their voices. He didn't mention the incident. Didn't call anyone out. He just stood by the names on the memorial wall, read them one by one. Then he nodded. Once. Walked out. Later that week, a recruiter told a local paper, "We're reviewing our mentorship model." Community leaders began quoting Kane's one line, "You might want to call your superior." The ripple didn't need a speech. It needed a wound they couldn't bandage. The murmur in the courtroom faded the moment Kane stepped through the doors. No rustling papers. No cleared throats. Just silence. He walked slowly, uniform crisp, medals gleaming, eyes focused straight ahead. Every step echoed off the marble floor, like a verdict already delivered. The officers who once mocked him didn't move. One adjusted his collar. The other blinked fast, as if that could erase memory. Kane didn't glance their way. He didn't need to. They already saw him. At the front bench he sat, quietly, deliberately. Across from him, the two officers avoided his gaze, but their bodies betrayed them. One's foot tapped under the table. The other's hands hovered too long over a closed notebook. Cameras flashed quietly, capturing the very same badge they'd tried to reduce to nothing. Now, centered on his chest like a challenge, neither of them could answer. Behind him, rows of cadets sat a little straighter. "General Kane," the prosecutor began, voice even. "Why didn't you respond publicly?" Kane's tone never lifted. Because they weren't the disease, just symptoms. The room inhaled, then stilled again. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. In those few words, every buried file, every dismissed complaint, every nod and move-on moment was exposed. The prosecutor leaned back. The camera shutters paused, then started again, slower. The monitor flickered on. Still frame. Kane standing, badge midair. The slap, the pause. Him kneeling, not defeated, just retrieving what they'd tried to strip. Each frame advanced. Each angle sharpened. The younger officer looked down, unable to face the screen. His partner scratched his arm, then stopped. No one gasped. No one needed to. They had already seen it online. The real shock was realizing nothing could take it back. Kane leaned forward slightly. He didn't name names. Instead, he told stories. A soldier pulled over 3 times outside his own base. Asked if the uniform was real. A captain mistaken for a delivery driver because he was black and driving a clean car. A general, me, told to use the back entrance at a defense gala. Each word landed quietly. No anger, just memory. A woman in the second row dabbed her eyes. A cadet looked down, his jaw clenched. The stories didn't shout. They sank. The committee chair cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the—" A chair scraped. The police chief stood. "I failed to—" He didn't finish. He stepped back from the microphone, removed his nameplate, and left through the side door. No one followed. No one clapped. It wasn't a protest. It was an agreement without words. In the far corner, a cadet muttered, just loud enough, "About damn time." The officer was called next. He approached the mic like it was a ledge. "We didn't know who he was," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Kane looked at him for the first time. Not with fury, just stillness. That's the problem. The officer nodded once, but it wasn't in agreement. It was in surrender. He turned and returned to his seat. His badge number may as well have disappeared in that moment. She had been standing behind him the whole time, silent, unflinching. Kane's daughter, sharp-suited, calm. A lawyer known in multiple courtrooms. But here she didn't speak. She didn't need to. When the second officer turned to look at her, maybe searching for pity, she held his stare. He looked away first. That was her closing argument. Kane stood again near the end, adjusted the mic. "I didn't come here for revenge," he said. "I came so they'd see themselves clearly, without the badge." That line didn't echo because of the room. It echoed because of the people in it. A junior officer shifted uncomfortably. One of the broadcasters lowered his camera. Not because it wasn't worth capturing, but because he already knew it would never capture all of it. No final statements, no orders, no raised voices. Kane turned. He didn't shake hands. He didn't smile. He simply walked. Everyone stood. Not for protocol, not for appearance, but for him. The man they had tried to humiliate was leaving, not broken, not bitter, but complete. The batch they slapped? It was now history's headline. And as the doors closed behind him, the courtroom remained silent. No verdict was needed, because this was the verdict. No press lights, no microphones, no statements. Kane didn't explain anything. He didn't owe them that. But his absence? It spoke, louder than any headline. An empty chair at a City Hall tribute became a headline on its own. The mayor said, "Some history walks through the door. Some just stands outside and changes everything." Kane did neither. He stayed home. And still, the city shifted, not out of shame, but out of recognition. The suspension orders arrived in a brown envelope. No courtroom, no cameras, just signatures and silence. But what came after was louder. At the grocery store, the taller officer dropped his cart when a child stared at him too long. In church, the shorter one left early, couldn't finish the prayer when the choir sang about mercy. One deleted his online history. The other left a voicemail no one answered. "Tell him, I didn't know." Kane never heard it. He didn't need to. The internal memo leaked a week later. 13 cases, 13 stories. None of them had reached the public until now. And none had needed Kane's name to resurface. The real break came when an officer spoke. Off record. No camera. Just truth. "We all saw it," he admitted. "We just didn't want to lose our seat." It wasn't one slap. It was 1,000 moments finally cracked open. Systems collapse not from pressure, but when silence stops being safe. At the academy, something new appeared. Bronze, clean, quiet. A plaque beneath the flagpole. Field Marshal Luther Kane, a standard, not a symbol. It didn't need ceremony. Cadets passed it daily. Some nodded, others saluted. A few just kept walking, but slower. Not because they disagreed, because they didn't yet know how to become what he'd been forced to be. A leader with no safety net. A mirror most weren't ready to stand in front of. Kane visited the memorial just before dusk. The breeze moved his coat. No staff, no escort, just him and the wall. He found the name quickly, his friend James. They'd served together in a place no one remembered until the war was over. He brushed dust off the carved letters. "Didn't forget," he said quietly, "still fighting." No one else was there, except someone passing. They paused, then walked on. Some moments are too sacred for company. His granddaughter climbed onto his lap, paper in hand. "Look," she said, proud, "it's you." The drawing was a circle with stars and something like a badge. Colorful, crooked. Kane smiled. "Looks official." She leaned closer. "Did they hurt you?" He hesitated, not from the question, but from how many answers it carried. He touched her cheek. "Not enough to change who I am." She nodded. She didn't need more. Some truths live best in fewer words. Kane walked the neighborhood later that week. Just a coat, his hands in his pockets. No title, no medal. The patrol car slowed as it reached him. Same unit number, different posture. The officer inside didn't roll the window down, didn't nod, just looked and then lowered his eyes. Kane kept walking. That wasn't guilt. It wasn't apology. It was recognition. And sometimes that's how change begins. Quiet, incomplete, but real. Back home, he sat by the window. The light was low. Across the room, the badge was framed on the wall. He didn't stare at it like a trophy. He stared like it was still asking a question. He whispered, more to himself than anyone, "I wore this longer than some of them were alive." A pause. "I never wore it to be protected." Another pause. "I wore it so the next one wouldn't need protection at all." And in that moment, he wasn't speaking to the past. He was answering the future. The neighborhood was quiet. Kane stood at the edge of his porch, coat folded over one arm, looking out at nothing in particular. Across the street, a boy rode by on a bike. He slowed, lifted a hand, and gave a small nod. Kane returned it. That nod, it wasn't about military rank or titles. It was about something else, something earned the hard way. Behind him, his daughter stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed him one, no words exchanged. They stood there a while, watching, breathing. The past didn't fade, but it no longer chased them. Later that night, Kane sat down at his desk, pulled open a drawer, took out a folded photo, black and white, edges frayed, his grandfather in uniform. Below it, Kane's own badge. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat still and let the weight of it all settle in, because this wasn't about punishment. It never had been. It was about truth, about being seen, about legacy, about making sure that the next boy who walks into a room in uniform doesn't get asked who he is, just because of what he looks like, and maybe, just maybe, gets to wear his badge without needing to justify his right to exist. Have you ever watched someone carry quiet dignity through a world that kept trying to strip it away? What would you do if the uniform you earned became the thing they used against you? If this story made you stop and feel something, pass it forward. Someone out there is still walking in silence, waiting for the world to finally hear what it's refused to see. Thanks for watching. Until next time, walk proud, and let your silence shake the ground.